Afternoon, America. Brian James Blem here on. Welcome you back to another episode of What the Fuck's Up. Last episode, I talked a little bit about sort of what was taking place, following, this end of the Cold War and lead up to Bill Clinton and his overall foreign policy, probably more so Hillary Clinton's foreign policy, because we all know Bill Clinton was too busy doing other things in the Oval Office. And so we know who the boss was in that relationship and who actually wore the pants. But, what began to happen, I didn't talk a whole lot about what began to happen under George Bush Jr., right? We have September 11, 2001 terror attacks, the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, the flight that went down in Pennsylvania. And so the most terrific terrorist attack on domestic homeland, the United States of America, the continental mainland. And so, boom, what does America do, right? Congress gets together and they slap out this really big Department of Homeland Security bill that basically they called the Patriot Act, right? And the Patriot Act would give the national security agencies very far sweeping powers over the American public. Listen to your telephone calls, do whatever they want, right? And we know, we have their lawyers interpreting what the Patriot Act means and what they can do. And it wasn't until Edward Snowden that we actually learned what they were using the Patriot Act for. Our government then, of course, went after Edward Snowden. And so, too bad, because Edward Snowden was a whistleblower and he was showing the American people just how the United States federal government's national security organizations had become no different than the Gestapo, had become no different than the East German Stasi, right? How they had become the enemy and the threat that they were created to deter. And we're still feeling the ramifications of that today. Let's take a look at what happens when you have an election that's stolen and the appointment of a man who has absolutely no cognitive function. And it's clear, if you don't see it now, it's clear that Joe Biden was not president of the United States of America. He was president in name only, and other people were running the government. But let's ask a question. Who was running the Department of Homeland Security, right? That would be a man by the name of Alejandro Mayorkas. And was Alejandro Mayorkas taking instructions from the President of the United States of America, or was he acting as President of the United States of America? Because what we see happening with the politicization of the Department of Homeland Security and agencies within its purview is quite substantial. Now, Alejandro Mayorkas has a long-time relationship with the Clintons. He's got a long-time relationship with the Obamas, right? In 1998, Bill Clinton appointed Alejandro Mayorkas to be the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Something Republicans should have blocked back then, but Republicans are Republicans, so who knows? They don't have any intestinal fortitude, and so they don't have the hunger to fight. In 2013, go back to 2009. Alejandro Mayorkas was in the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. He ran that agency, and he came under fire because it would appear there was an investigation by the Inspector General that looked like there was a quid pro quo, right? He was helping Las Vegas casinos bring in lots of illegal immigrants, cheap workforce. You get your HB5 visa or whatever you want if you invest a substantial amount of money. There were really questions as to where the money was truly coming from. I would say there are probably questions as to where the money was truly going as well. But then in 2013, like it works in Washington, D.C., you do something wrong, you get promoted, right? 2013, Obama appoints Alejandro Mayorkas to the Deputy Director of the Department Department of Homeland Security, or Deputy Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security. And then in 2021, we know that Joe Biden appoints him, or whoever was running the appointment process, to be the actual director of Homeland Security, right? So Alejandro Mayorkas takes over the Department of Homeland Security in 2021 under the Biden administration. We know Alejandro Mayorkas is very anti-MAGA, and he's very anti-Donald Trump, just like all of those people he's affiliated with and that he works with. And so he's a lawyer, and he knows the ropes around the legal system. But what begins to take place under Alejandro Mayorkas, and how does it really pertain to the war on terror, right? Because that's what began in 2001 after Osama bin Laden and his crew attacked the United States of America. The war on terror. Can anybody actually tell me what terrorism is? I mean, the technical definition of terrorism is using violence or threats of violence to achieve a political end, right? Politics, according to Clausewitz, is war by other means. It's war by peaceful means. They both have the same goal, right? To control government. And if you can wage war to control government, guns and stuff, bloodshed, blah, 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 or you can do it through peaceful means like we have historically done in the United States under the Constitution of the United States of America. And that's what MAGA has been doing, and that's what Donald Trump has been doing. But Alejandro Mayorkas would use that definition, the definition of terrorism against MAGA and against Trump and against those people who are currently criticizing their government, and he would push a new definition out of the Department of Homeland Security, right? You all remember when Alejandro Mayorkas made you all what? You go to a school board meeting and you challenge the board members. You go to a county board of supervisors meeting and you challenge what the board of supervisors wants to do in terms of policy. And what are you? Those are the people then that became labeled terrorists under Alejandro Mayorkas. So the first thing he does is he takes the word terrorism and he redefines it. And so now you have this war on terror, folks, where you, the American public, who is sick of watching the crap this sucker was doing with your government, are the terrorist. That's the way it worked, folks. He redefined terrorism to mean something else, and that something else was the American citizen who was critical of his government, right? And we can be critical. We have First Amendment rights. This pushed all the way down into the state of Arizona. For example, somebody Arizona needs to get rid of, the Secretary of State, right? Now I can't even remember his name. The current Secretary of State in Arizona used to be the Maricopa County recorder until he was unelected because he totally didn't botch, I don't think, the 2020 election. It went off as planned, I think. And so we have the Secretary of State in the state of Arizona. Tries to make law, right, using the Election Procedures Manual. And he includes languages in the Election Procedures Manual that says that criminalizes speech that's critical of election officials. You would no longer, ever, under Arizona Secretary of State, be allowed to criticize an election official for what they do for work, right? You can't say, well, you guys fucked this one up really bad. They come, send the police, the Gestapo to your house, and they would throw you in jail, right? This is sort of what that is. This is Alejandro Mayorkas and this cabal that's running the White House, redefining terms to suit their interests, right? So Alejandro Mayorkas we need to investigate Alejandro Mayorkas and find out if he was acting as President of the United States of America. Was he acting under orders to do what he did from the President of the United States of America? Or was he just doing whatever the hell he wanted to do while heading the Department of Homeland Security, right? Why is this a bad thing? He was in charge of Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. That's where we send all federal law enforcement to get trained. What can you do when you train law enforcement? You can change their minds. You can feed them your definition of terrorism. You can feed them information about violent groups of people, kind of like Stephen Richer was trying to spoon feed our courts about MAGA being violent and extremists when he had absolutely no evidence that that was the case. You can change people's behavior when you educate them. And so if you didn't like what you heard in a federal law enforcement training class, what do you think would likely happen to you? Have a nice day, sir. Go work at Circle K or something, because you're not going to be in federal law enforcement if you're not going to do as you're told, right? Intelligence and Analysis Agency, right? They work with the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence collections agencies, domestic and foreign, the FBI, to gather information on individual citizens in the United States of America, right? And to analyze that data and to make recommendations to federal law enforcement about what to do about you, right? FEMA. We all know what was happening during major disasters, right? It's the truth has come out. Orders were given from high on down. Did they come from Alejandro Mayorkas, or did they come from Joe Biden? Who's giving the orders, folks? Who's giving the orders to ignore flood victim homes if they're a Trump supporter? If you get a flood victim that comes out of his house wearing a MAGA hat, turn around, go the other way, they get no support from their own government that they fund with their hard-earned taxes, right? This was a horrible department to put Alejandro Mayorkas in, and somebody knew it, and that's why he was there. CISA. If you watch my show, you know about CISA. What is CISA? The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This is the arm of the United States National Intelligence Community that is set and tasked with censoring your speech, censoring American speech, making sure that the narrative of the government is the only true narrative allowed to be brought forth, because they can't have you out telling people the truth. That would destroy what they were trying to create with this brave new world, right? So a massive censorship operation, not to mention the fact that they got all these lower level agencies pushing everyone to let CISA have access to their computer systems. Gives us assets. They're even, State Bar of Arizona is even telling lawyers, let CISA probe your systems for free. If you're a lawyer and you do that, you are a fool, an absolute fool. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, right? And Customs and Border Protection, CBP. This is where Alejandro Mayorkas truly worked his magic as he dissolved the United States border, and he just swamped the United States with as many people as they could bring here as possible, completely unchecked and completely unvetted. Alejandro Mayorkas wasn't a failure, America. He failed the principles of America and U.S. constitutional government, but he did not fail the people who put him in power. The question is, was Alejandro Mayorkas acting on his own Or was he taking orders from the President of the United States of America? And this is the problem, folks. When you have a tragedy strike the United States of America in like 9/11, that many people actually believe the United States government knew was going to happen and or at least helped plan what was going to happen. I'm not saying that's what the case is, but boom. Immediately thereafter, folks, the legislation they would need to start controlling and dictating to you and to start interacting in your politics and to start influencing your presidential elections was drafted in the mere span of 45 days and made into law, followed by the Department of Homeland Security becoming probably the most failed agency as far as Republican constitutional values go. It is time, America, that we restructure government. It's time that we get rid of the 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve and replace them with an income earning tariff, which would serve very much like I can't even spell, very much like a sales tax, right? If you want to buy something from a foreign country, you can buy it. You're just going to have to pay like maybe a little tax on it. A lot of people are saying we should have a national sales tax instead of a federal income tax. And this would be the best way to do it. And then the good is that, the tax is collected when it enters the United States. And, our companies don't really have to worry about it. But America needs a significant investigation into what took place under the Biden administration and whether or not Alejandro Mayorkas was acting president of the United States of America, or whether he was taking orders from Joe Biden or somebody else. Because we know he's very close to the Clintons, we know he's very close to Obama, and maybe he was just doing his own thing, who knows? Or maybe he was working in conjunctions with others who had this master plan, right, to destroy constitutional governance in the United States. And with that, I'm going to tell you folks, stay active. You have to stay off your couch. You have to stay involved. We are winning, but we have not won yet. If we stop, if we go back to our couches because Trump won and we think it's victory day, then they will take power back. If we get disgusted and we say, I just can't do this anymore because we're never going to win, and then that's given up and you've lost. We have to stay active. We have to stay in the game. 2026, we need to get rid of people like Lindsey Graham, who is pushing America to war. We don't need a war. We need to get rid of every member of Congress, Lisa Murkowski, Senator Kelly out of Arizona, right? We need to, he won't be up in 2026, neither will Murkowski. They're both 2028. Wishful thinking. Sorry, Brian. We need to replace every member of Congress, Senate and House, that will not vote to repeal the 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve Act. We have work to do. Stay in the game. Peace.